HTML is a programming language that is used to create websites. We use HTML to structure the content of our website. HTML is made up of elements, which means all the content we write will be surrounded by HTML tags. If you can imagine a quote written on a piece of paper, in order to let people know who are reading it that it is a quote, we'll have an opening quote, the content, and a closing quote. That's basically how an HTML tag or element works. You can create a website in any text editor by using the following structure. I'm going to use TextEdit on the Mac. If you're on a PC, you can use Notepad or Microsoft Word. So we'll open a new TextEdit document. And the first thing you want to do is click Format and say Make Plain Text. Now in HTML5, we require what's called a doc type declaration. It's the first line of any HTML document, and it looks like this. This lets the web browser know this is an HTML document and it should be translated as such. The first element we're going to put on our page is called the root element, and it looks like this. This is the standard structure for an HTML element. We have our opening tag and our closing tag. They look the same, but we just have to put a / in the closing tag. Now, all the rest of our content is going to be nested inside of this HTML element, so we'll put that on a new line. And you'll see that I'm indenting the code here. This makes it a lot easier to read for other developers. We're going to have two other elements inside of our HTML element. The first one is called the head element, which also has an opening and closing tag. And then we're going to have the body element, which again, opening and closing tag. Inside the head element, we can provide information about the website, such as SEO keywords, metadata, things you don't need to worry about right now. But what we can put in here is a title, which is again another element. So I'm going to indent again and nest a title element inside of the head element. And I'll show you what this does. We can call this my website. And we actually already have a website right here, just with these 7 lines of code. So we'll save this. And this is important. You can call it whatever you want, but you need to save it as a .html file type. So we'll say use HTML. And we'll see here now we have this file index. If we open it up, you'll see it opens in a web browser. And right here we have the title of our website. So that's because of this HTML element right here. So let's close that out and we'll take a look at a couple of common HTML elements. From this point forward, anything that you want to be seen on your web page will go inside of the body tag or be nested in the body tag. And again, we'll use the proper indentation. If we want to add a heading or headline to our page, we can use a heading element. One of them is called an H1. Again, it has an opening and closing tag, and we put our content inside of the tag. So we could say, welcome to my website. We'll save that again, open it up, and now we have a heading on our web page. An H1 just makes the text large and bold. And there are 6 versions of the heading: H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. And the text just gets a little bit smaller as each one goes. So you could add things like subheadings. If I were to say, right below this, we'll add another H3 element, and we'll say this is a subheading. Again, opening, closing tag, save it. We can see it's still bold and a little bigger, but it's smaller than the H1. Another common element is the paragraph tag. So that looks like this. There's only one version of this tag, just a P, and we'll say this is a paragraph. We'll save again, and we'll see we have some plain text here. Now it automatically adds some spacing around it, so it formats it like a paragraph. We could add a second paragraph under here. Save. And see, we're getting this nice spacing in between. Now, let's say that we wanted to add another sentence here. And if we open it, so this is part of the same paragraph element. However, if we wanted this text to be on a new line, we can use something called a break tag. So instead of making a separate paragraph, in the middle of our text here, we'll add what's called a break tag that looks like this. Now, this is called a self-closing tag because there's not actually any content that goes inside of it. It just has the name of the element, and by adding that, it gives us that line break. You can see there's less spacing because it's the same paragraph, but it's on a new line. Another one of these self-closing elements is called a horizontal rule. So if we put an HR here, we'll see this adds a line across the page. So again, these are self-closing tags, the BR and the HR, because they only require the one tag. And they're also considered void elements, which means there's no content inside of it. It's just the tag itself, and HTML knows what to do with that. So let's say we wanted to add an image to our web page. For that, we'll use the image tag. Now this again is a self-closing tag, and in order to provide a picture, we need to give a little bit more information to the tag by using what's called an attribute. An attribute is just additional information that's provided inside of the HTML tag, and this one is called a source. So we'll say source equals opening and closing quote, and in here we can put a path to a picture that maybe is on our computer somewhere. So maybe you have pictures, mypicture.jpg, or you can use a URL from the internet. So real quickly, there's a website called Unsplash, which offers really nice, high quality, free images. We'll take this picture of the tiger here. And if we say copy image address, and we place that inside our source attribute, now on our web page we have the picture of the tiger. We can provide more attributes to the image tag, such as height and width. And each attribute is just separated by a space. So maybe we want to say height is 100 pixels and the width is 50 pixels. And this will resize our image. Those aren't required, but if you want to make changes to the size, you can do that. Otherwise, it'll just be the actual size of the image. So one of the last tags I'll show you is called an anchor tag. An anchor tag is basically a clickable link that will direct you to another website. So again, opening, closing tag. We put in here what we want our link to say. So maybe we want it to say link to Google. And we'll provide an attribute that specifies what website this should link to when it's clicked. And we do that using what's called an href attribute. So we could say google.com. And here, now we have a link. We click it, it takes us to Google. That's called an anchor tag. So that's basically it for HTML. It just consists of a bunch of elements that are all nested inside of one large HTML element. And when you get to the point where you want to make it look like it's not from 1995, you use CSS. CSS is what would allow you to target this heading and maybe make it a different font, make it blue, and put it over here on the center of the page. Or maybe you want this link to look like a button. We can provide a border, a background color, and give it some behavior so maybe when we put our mouse over it, it flashes. That's all done with CSS. So once you understand the basics of HTML, I would recommend learning about CSS. If you like the video, please give it a like. Feel free to subscribe as I plan on posting a 10-minute CSS explanation as well. Thanks.